Olá a todos e sejam bem-vindos ao Tudo sobre Futebol Americano, hoje para falar sobre futebol americano sem fronteiras. O episódio de hoje tem o convidado Anthony Skinner, um treinador com experiência internacional. O podcast vai ser conduzido em inglês e esperamos, obviamente, que todos gostem daquilo que será aqui o tópico da conversa. Hello, coach. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Always great to see you again. I miss you, my friend.
Me as well, me as well. For everyone that is listening, this is our episode 115, and I have a very special guest, Coach Anthony Skinner. I've worked with Coach Anthony Skinner in the past in our project, the Lisbon Devils. He was like my mentor since year 2, and I thought that for this episode that will close the last 13 weeks, where we had 13 conversations with this one about American football in Portugal. I thought it will be good to have a coach here for him to share a little bit about his experience, about what he did in Portugal, what he did in Europe, because he has other experiences around Europe. And I think this will be a good conversation for anyone that wants to keep learning more about American football in Portugal or around the world. We have our second international guest, so thank you very much, Coach. And first and foremost, I would ask you to make like a quick intro about yourself, about your past with American football, and maybe going into it until when our paths crossed each other.
Yeah, my pleasure. And again, thank you for having me. And it's an honor for me to be chosen to end your season podcast. So, yeah, international coaching happened sort of by accident for me. I'm a former player myself, having played through sort of high school and in Canada, where I'm from. In many cities, there's also a city league as well as a high school league. So some athletes have the opportunity to play in both. And so I grew up myself playing in the city league, and then a little bit in high school, and then very early on in university, before starting a family very early and starting my job as a police officer. But when my son Alex turned around 10 years old, he'd always been around me when I was playing football. I played touch at a high level in tournaments all over Canada. And so he always grew up with a football in his hand. But at around 10 years old, he decided he wanted to start to play football. And so I was asked to, he was kind of recruited in a hockey rink because he was a good athlete. And I was recruited to become a coach at that point. And I had always been a defensive player, linebacker, and so I agreed. These were 10-year-olds. How hard could it be to coach 10-year-olds? And that's kind of how I stumbled onto coaching. But I sort of just grew coaching him as a coach myself. 20, I guess 29, 30 years old. You start to sort of develop your own language around coaching, and to sort of develop your own little strategies on how to adapt your message to the group of athletes that you're coaching, whether they're 10-year-olds or whether they're 30 or 40-year-olds. You develop your own style, and I actually think that it was an advantage for me coming to Europe, having had the opportunity to coach young boys, because it allows you to develop that language of how to make people understand what you're trying, to say, and for them to visualize what you mean by using your language. I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but
no, completely, yeah.
I have catchphrases that I've used since coaching 10-year-olds that I still use now. When I'm tackling, I say, be an airplane, and these are visual cues that people can put in their minds. And but anyway, I coached Alex until he went to university himself as a highly recruited athlete. And I decided I was going to just be a fan at that point. I stopped coaching, having coached in some of the some elite provincial all-star leagues as Alex progressed through those years. But I wanted to just be a fan for a bit. And when Alex played at university, when he eventually took over the starting job as the quarterback at the university that he was at, the former starter who he replaced and who was graduating, Alex and he were actually pretty good friends. And he told me that he was playing in Spain. And I said, "What do you mean you're playing in Spain? Like, what are you talking about?" And he explained Euro players to me. And so I went on to Euro players and I started to sort of look around, and I kind of thought, wow, like this is really interesting. And that's when I sort of had the idea about becoming an international coach. But because back then I still had about 10 or 12 years to be a police officer before my retirement. Now I only have 2.5 years, but back then I decided, well, what if I offered my services kind of in a different way? What if I offered to come, if I offered my services for free, my experience for free, but, if a team was able to help me with some of the expenses of travel, and I would be like a distance coach or a guest coach, or I could come and do a defensive camp to help, teach specific techniques of tackling or systems or whatever to teams. And so I found, an opportunity very quickly with a Big Six team that was having, in the moment, they were having a little bit of a hiccup on defense. They had a very, very famous Hall of Fame CFL coach who was their head coach. And but this was an eclectic group, and that's the word I'll use. They were very eclectic. They weren't cohesive. They weren't a culture. They weren't a team. They weren't brothers. They were very much playing as individuals, and they needed help. And so a defensive help. And so I went over there to help them sort of gel their defense a little bit. And don't get me wrong, these Big Six athletes are very much European football players that know a lot of football already. I think what I brought was just more intensity and attitude and bringing them together and forcing them to play the system versus as individuals. And, the team ended up not doing so well in the Big Six, but went to the Swiss final. And I went back and forth a few times that year. And of course, it was great to get the experience of that CFL Hall of Fame coach and that opportunity. But like I said, I always sort of felt that my niche was going to be in helping young European teams in countries like Portugal, where, football is not viewed as a primary sport. In Germany and Austria and Switzerland, young boys are playing football at 8, 10, 12 years old, also like in Canada or in the US. But in some of the countries that I've had the pleasure of coaching in, it comes on later. And, it's an opportunity for me to have sort of, having had that opportunity to develop a very systematic approach and simple language and a simple system to be able to, to have offered my services to some teams. And that's where I've had the most fun. I've had the most fun in Europe when I'm coming to a young team or an eager team or a team that is just so open to learning versus a team that, like I said, they feel like they're that they don't stink and I'm already good enough. I don't need to listen to you. And so that's kind of how my journey happened to become a coach. And I just sort of put myself out there, and there weren't too many people on Europlayers offering sort of a service like mine. And so I was able to secure, coaching in 6 or 7 or 8 countries so far. And it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no. And during that process, after the first experience you mentioned in Switzerland, eventually we crossed paths in Portugal at the Devils. Do you remember our first conversation? Do you still have memories from that?
I do. And I have to tell you, my friend, I have to tell you, I have that a very similar conversation each time, because let's face it, I mean, my situation, my services aren't perfect for every team's needs. And sometimes teams interview me on Zoom or on Skype or whatever. And they realize sort of at some point throughout the conversation that, you know, it's not exactly the best fit. You know, they want someone more there and whatever. But in the times that it has worked out, you know me, I'm very animated, I'm very passionate, I get very carried away in explaining what I do and how I do it, and I get almost excited. And I remember with you and Duarte, just there being a really great energy. I remember, you know, at times sort of getting carried away, and I could almost, I felt, maybe I'm wrong, but I almost felt that you guys were kind of sharing that enthusiasm, and that you were like, holy cow, like this guy is, you know, this
Yeah,
guy's got energy for
I
days,
can
and this guy.
I can tell you that after our conversation, the first one, we hang up and I called Duarte and I was like, "Is this for real?" He's like, he's really offering this like a consultancy kind of situation away. And just to explain to everyone, basically what we did was coach will be like a guest head coach for the team working alongside me. You will provide us input using a software that's called Huddle, where we will record the games and the practices and upload it in the platform. And imagine, again, our practices ended up around 11 p.m. in Portugal, but in Canada, that's like before dinner. So that would allow for a coach to, during the night in Portugal, input details in the platform for then the next day the players could see. So that chemistry that was created, and eventually coach would come to Portugal like three times at the most during the year for the finals or for specific camps. That chemistry that was created was like very important for the growth of the team, for the growth of me as a coach as well, and for the team ultimately, for everyone. So yeah, I remember that after that conversation, I was like, "Is this for real?" And yeah, and things really worked out really well. I mean, on the second year, I think was when the team specifically on the defense like gave a big boost in terms of uh, knowing what they were doing, because we had
Mhm.
good players. The Devils always had good players, great athletes, but they didn't know mostly what they were doing. So you helped a lot on defense. You helped a lot with practice planning, because before you coming to the Devils, I followed the script from my previous team. I was applying the best that I knew at that time, but you provide us that a new way of thinking and applying things. So that's a big difference you watched from your experience in Canada to Europe, or for places like Portugal. Like the practice planning wasn't the way it was supposed.
Yeah. And I think that is actually the number one thing that, um, the number one thing, and yeah, I'll come back to this in a second, but I just want to sort of touch more on what you said before. So, you know, when I did come to Portugal, I came early in the season, almost like for training camp. And so, you know, we really started off that first season that I was there. We started off sort of with that tempo right away. Here's the new expectation. This is the new tempo, the new pace of work. And you know, I got to meet everybody, and that's also a very important part, and that's how I prefer it the most, you know, to be there. And so I have a chance to meet everybody, because you know me, I'm a yin and yang guy. I'm the first guy to yell and blast you, you know, when you make a mistake, but when you do it right, I'm the loudest guy to celebrate your you know, your accomplishment. And so, you know, I always prefer to come and to meet everyone, because then when the corrections come on the Huddle platform, with me drawing circles and arrows on the platform and saying like, what the hell are you doing here? You're supposed to be here, with arrows. You know, the guys aren't offended by it. You know, um, guys understand. They've met me. They've had the
Yeah,
chance. I've
there's a
joked with them.
relationship or
Yeah,
the
I've put my arm around them once before and said, come on, wake up. Like, and so, you know, but when, so, you know, and back to sort of practice plans and stuff, you know, to this day, the number one thing that I see when I see, you know, new teams that I'm helping is the tempo and the pace and the urgency and the understanding that, um, you know, wasted reps are a bad thing. You know, they're counterproductive, not only for time, but bad habits are developed in bad reps, and so for me to make the same guy do the same tackling drill 5 times in a row, um and then of course when he gets it right again, I'm the one that's like, yeah, like jumping, and everyone clap, 1 2 2 claps. And these are the things that I find in my journeys in various cities in Europe is the pace at practice, the tempo at practice is flat, and players are it's wasted reps. They're not focused on their assignments, and they'll go through an assignment half-hearted and kind of half do it right, and then the coach, whoever it is, whether it's a national coach or an international coach, I've also seen, if you let them get away with that, how are you going to build and improve? And I think that I remember, and I have to give you a compliment. I came, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I know for sure you were excited about me coming, and so was Duarte. But you didn't know me, and I was arriving there, and I am passionate and opinionated, and I have to give you lots of props. You gave me lots of space, and you absorbed, you watched, you learned. You didn't always say much, when it came to how the tempo that I was sort of, the way I was, we were practicing and stuff. But it was amazing to watch your transformation as a human being and as a head coach. I mean, I think you grew exponentially, and not because of me. You just grew because we always grow anytime we are faced with new experiences and new ways of doing. And you were able to take the best of you and the best of your former mentors, and you take the best of you, the best of, I know you had another, I can't remember his name, but you had another American head coach that was also influential in your career. And, the best of your time with me and with Craig and whoever. And, you turned into a hell of a head coach, Amorim. You really did. You also developed your own style a little bit more on the friendship sort of side of things. When you flipped a switch, and the guys paid attention, and you had that respect. So it was amazing to watch you even between year 1 and year 2. And I think you and I, our friendship grew between year 1 and year 2 also. And
for sure, yeah.
of course with Duarte. But yeah, it is an amazing journey every time you come into a place where you have these eager young athletes that want to learn. And that's why I just like it so much better when there are programs that want to learn, because you can affect things so quickly when you get them focused on the tasks that they need to focus on and the techniques. And I don't want to name names, but I remember certain defensive backs who may or may not be under 5'5" tall, who have I don't want to name any names, but you know who you are, and I love him too. But I remember the first few practices, without having had the breakdown, like I have an expression, and I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast or not.
You can swear.
But I have an expression, and I've said it for years. You remember me saying it, like any asshole can have a whistle around his neck. And, and this is what I say to anyone that is considering either building a new team in Portugal or wants to take their team either in Portugal or anywhere in Europe to the next level. Find yourself a coach that is a technical teacher. It doesn't matter that he's a master in X offense or Y offense or X defense. It doesn't matter if he's a master in understanding the defense, but find someone that you have the confidence can break down movements in such a way that athletes can understand it. And back to that defensive back, I remember the first few practices the first year, not a shyness or not being scared. That's not the right word, but a hesitancy and in tackling and stuff, because they'd never been walked through it. YouTube video on a tackling drill, it doesn't mean that you can that to somebody because you've watched the drill. I love that first year. And by halfway through that year, we got pumped the first game by the Crusaders. it was embarrassing. They pumped us and they ran up the score on us, something that they would live to regret down the road. But by the end of the season, if I remember correctly, I think our last 5 games, that defense had started to gel, and I think we only allowed about 8 or 10 points a game on average for the last 5 games. So the defense gelled quickly, and the offense, under your guidance, and you provided some assistance to a former coach that didn't stay with the program very long after that, but it was great. And then by year 2, you bring in, we brought in Joey and Colin and Malcolm as imports, who then also bring an element of stability and the ability to share their experience and to help out in coaching. And but on defense, year 2, we pretty well were just the national guys. It was just the Portuguese guys, and
That's true. Yeah.
They had a fantastic defensive year, and it was a great experience for sure.
No, yeah, you talked about some things that for anyone that might think about like a coaching career, it's really important, because it's not only about knowing the X and O's, knowing about the system as you've mentioned. It's also about knowing how to make a team come together, about the mental side, these details that coach spoke about, creating like a bond with the players, making them aware that you're there, you're going to be their first, the first person to say to them that they are doing the right stuff, but you are also going to be the first one to yell to them. So all of those aspects need to come together. Also with the planning, before you coming on board and started giving us inputs on that, you don't need to have a 2-hour practice going off speed. It's better to have 1 hour and 30 minutes doing the right stuff at a good pace. So that was a change in our way of thinking, because before that we would run like 2 hours, 2.5 hours practices, slow paced. But no, a football game is a speed game. You have to go full speed and then rest, but full speed, when you're going full speed, you really need to go full speed. So those kinds of elements all needed to come together for us to develop as a team. So you were crucial for that in our second year as a team, and your first one with us. And regarding your other experience in Europe, how did you felt like comparing your experience with the Devils in Portugal, the kind of football that is played in Portugal, with the other one that is played in around Europe? Can you like create points of like relationship or difference that you have identified?
It's funny because some of the stereotypes that we all hear internationally are true, and it's lovely. And again, another tip that I have for any coach that's listening that might want to go is, spend some time learning about the culture and the people of the places that you're going to potentially go. But the Portuguese athletes, some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life are Portuguese. And the Latin blood, when so jovial and so good-hearted most of the time, but then some kind of a play happens in the game, or a cheap shot or something, and then to see like 60 guys lose their shit on the sideline, but then I've played in coached in Germany, and again, the stereotype is almost ridiculously true, in the sense that everything is just so more calculated and I don't know, it's not strict but straight, and so it's very different. In Norway, it was kind of a little bit more like Germany. The players were very very sincere and very kind and whatever, but a little bit more straight-laced, a little bit more serious. And but in Portugal, it was very I loved it the most, because it was really, I'm a touchy-feely guy, and I like to run up and and jump up, and when a player's had a sack, I'm animated, so I love to go up and have a moment, an interaction with a player who's just had a sack and to bump or to high five or whatever. And so, yeah, it's been different, each country brings different nuances to how the sideline feels, but I love passion on the sidelines. And I always also found that the teams that I coached that had more sort of touchy feely vibes to it, they were the teams that also gelled the best together as a unit. They're the ones that were that bought into the culture the best, and that's another tip for head coaches. You're not only there to provide the X's and O's and the techniques, but you're there to help build a culture. You and Duarte and Pedro, you had a vision, you had a business plan almost, so to speak, of year one goals, year two goals, year three goals, and that's important. A club has to have that. And some of the teams that I've coached for, they were more like, okay, well, pay so and so to come here, pay Coach Skinner, or not pay me a salary, but pay for my expenses to come. But it was like a business, but not in a good way. Like, it was transactional. There wasn't the culture. There wasn't the culture being built. And so, the places that had more success were the ones that were less transactional and more people actually buying into how it felt. And I can tell you, and I know Joey said it in the podcast, in his podcast, I think that coming to Portugal changed his life as a human being, just because of the friendships and the connections that he made with those guys. And I mean, I feel the same. I don't talk to you guys every day, but I feel like I can still walk onto the field and have Jaldish, give me the same shit-eating grin, and walk up to me with his swagger, these are the memories of coaching with your team that are the best, for me.
And you also I would also like to add one thing to this, was the creation of narratives, because that's something that we don't think about, but it's really important to create, like a word, a sentence, a mojo that for the team to come together. And in that year two with you, the third year of the Devils, was Shock Portugal.
Shock Portugal, yeah.
About creating like something that can make and every professional sports team does the same. I remember the 49ers a couple of years ago was the quest for six. The Chiefs, the Kansas City Chiefs last year, run it back. So this is something that is very important. And again, for everyone that is listening to us, creating a narrative about what you're building in your team. Like, if you have a defeat during the season, you can create something that can make the team come together. So that was something that you also added to us. I'm not sure if you thought about it. It was something that you did like with the thought process or not, but I identified that not when you did it, but afterwards,
Yeah, I it is something that I do consciously. You might remember the first year it was big players make big plays. Yeah, I mean, there's always a little something that's not something I invented. That is something that's been recycled by a million coaches, about big players. But it's just something, a rally cry, right? Something that the guys can say or do, or you post a I use the Facebook platform as part of the way that I communicate with, posting some of my installation packages, on a chalkboard, filming myself, and I posted on the team's defensive Facebook group. And so, it was always there. I would always end my posts with hashtag Shock Portugal, because I wanted the guys to believe that defense, that they would become killers. And they did. Literally, I mean, I remember games where watching 8, 10, 12 players from the opposite team, Braga or whoever, I shouldn't say specific teams, I'm sorry, but I remember watching players like limp off the field like they had been beaten, like physically beaten. And give me your wallet, your shoes, and your cell phone. Now go home, like, and that's part of the culture, right? That's the important thing is, believing in a cause and believing in each other. And when a team has that, be careful, because they're dangerous. Any given Sunday, that team can really do some great things. And that's what you need to strive for when you're, if you're starting a program, general managers and presidents out there listening, that's what you need. Number one thing is a culture. Develop a culture, get a mantra, fix your mojo, fix your tempo at practice, no wasted reps. These are the things that, get coaches who are teachers, not just guys holding a whistle. These are the things that will change your program fast, like dramatically fast.
Yeah, now that we're coming into the last quarter of the podcast, that was going to be my last question about like coaching tips that you'll provide like for anyone. But you've already mentioned most of the things that, I mean, when someone is trying to build a culture, building a club needs to build a culture, build processes. When you say processes, it seems like business thing, but I believe everyone is understanding. But is there any other thing that comes to your mind that it's really important when you're thinking about becoming a coach, about deliver something to others? Because coaching is also deliver. You're delivering your time, delivering your love for the game, for people, for creating something. Is there anything else that comes to your mind that is really important to consider?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on it earlier, but I'm going to expand on it a little bit. So, this is especially important for national coaches, who may not themselves have started their journey in American football until they were in their mid-20s or later, right? Who knows? I mean, maybe they just, they loved watching it on TV all of their life. But it's different to love a sport and to be able to think that you can coach a sport. And here's the thing. So, you've decided that, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, or next year, you are now going to volunteer as a coach for X team in Portugal or wherever. And so, you start to do your research, you start to watch videos, you start to join coaching network groups on Facebook, you start to figure out, am I a 4-3 coach defensively, or am I a 3-4 coach? You start to develop your own things. And then you go on YouTube and you start to watch your videos. And you start to say, okay, here, I like this drill. And I like this drill. And then you go to the field and you set up the pylons, and you explain the drill to the guys, and then they start to do the drill. Okay, that's great. But have you seized the essence and the teaching point in the drill? Anybody can just make you run backwards and then, run sideways and then catch the ball and then do this, or bend over and touch this cone, but you have to understand, and you have to try in your mind to process what is the actual on-field application of this drill. And more importantly, if I see this on film, do I know what the corrections are to find? So much of coaching is identifying the nuances of where a movement or an exercise or a drill or something, where was the mistake, or where can there be an improvement? Like I said, I mean, you just run through a drill, you think you did it like the guys on YouTube did it. But I mean, do you really know why you're doing that drill? And most importantly, can you find the teaching point in that? And then the most important, can you find and stop a drill at that moment? Whoa, stop. Okay, and you remember me when I line guys up to do a drill, no wasted reps. That also meant when we're working. So shut up. All eyes are on the drill. When you finished and you went to the back of the line, that guy wasn't at the back of the line talking about the movie he's going to watch that night with his girlfriend. He's expected to turn and face and watch the next guy, because when a correction is being made on that guy, he needs to see that correction so that in 6 more turns, when it's his turn, he doesn't make that mistake, right? So are you able to stop a drill or make a guy do it again and be able to coach him through that small nuance? And that really is where I encourage all coaches, try to really develop that part of your coaching skill set, because that is the difference maker really between you being able to excel and 50 drills is not necessary. You need to have 5 drills and make sure that they're done exactly perfectly right, and that those movements become robotic.
Yeah.
And that's where your success as a young coach, will come. I mean, Felix is a great example of that. This is a guy with so much football knowledge. When I remember coming to him meeting him the first time, such an eager young coach. He was a player, he watched it on TV, he followed the NFL, but and I remember him also just like a sponge, just listening. And then in the second year when he basically was the on-site defensive coordinator, right? I mean, he was sort of my right-hand man. He was the guy that was there. And, he ran that season when I wasn't there. He was exceptional because he had grasped the understanding that it's the minutia that's the most important. So find in everything you do, find the 3 most important little things that you're trying to teach in, whether it's the offensive line, whether doesn't matter, whether it's not always just defense, but you need to be able to identify the nuances and teach them properly.
Yeah, no, that is an awesome tip for anyone that is listening, focusing on not the little things, but in the important miscues, not miscues. I'm not using the right words. It's miscues. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, there are little things that can, and then the one guy does it wrong, then the next guy comes up and does it wrong, and then the third guy. Now your drill is useless. Now exactly. The whole drill, you may as well have not even done the drill.
Yeah,
right.
I remember that I would never do something like stopping a practice if I felt that things weren't going so well. But after learning from you, sometimes it's better just stop the practice if for some reason things are not going and it's a macro scenario. Stop the practice. We'll come back tomorrow or the next day and start over. Sometimes, and that happened a couple of times. So. But yeah, focusing on the little things and those coaching tips, coaching points are like fundamental. I 100% agree. I mean, Coach, this was an amazing conversation. I believe anyone out there that can listen to this will learn a lot, not only the process that the both of us went through with the Devils in Portugal, but your experience internationally, and also can take a little bit of this and apply it in their, I don't know, coaching career that they are thinking, or even in their personal life, because these are things that you can apply also in your personal life. So anyone that is listening, I hope this was a good conversation, and you can take something from that. Coach, thank you very much once again. Do you have any plans for the future in terms of coaching? I am allowed to ask you this, or?
Oh yeah, me. Right now, I'm helping a young team in Serbia, and because of COVID, I haven't been able to travel over there. But I have a young player who plays middle linebacker for me, and he's just like Felix. He wants to learn, and he asks questions, and he's impassioned, and he's very dedicated, and the team is young, and they make a lot of mistakes, and I'm trying to build them from the beginning. So they've played 2 games in their national league, and they won both handily, and the defense is playing better, and so for me, I'm retiring in 2 years, and I think that the plan will be maybe to go and coach a few seasons, 1 or 2, not too many, full time, to go and live somewhere for 5-6 months and to be in the culture and living in the city. But for now, I'm going to continue to offer myself, as a consultant or as a guest coach or for camps. And, I welcome anybody out there who wants advice. I'm not saying hit me up if you want me to come coach for you. I mean, sure, do that also. But if you're a young coach and you want to just talk to me about my experiences, hit me up, find me on Facebook or find me on Europlayers. And, I love to help. I love to talk about football, and I love to see programs that are young and not doing well. I love to be part of that building process with young or startup, teams. So find me, and I'm there for everyone.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you very much. From Canada to Portugal to Germany to Norway, Serbia, you've been a little bit on every country all around the world. Let's see where the future takes you. Maybe we'll cross paths again in the future. We never know. That's the beauty of it. So, thank you very much once again, Coach, and thank you to everyone that is listening. We are going to now stop the podcast for 2 weeks. Okay, so until the end of June, there is not going to be any new episodes. But on the 1st of July, we started 32 days, 32 teams, previewing the NFL season for every team, their movements during the offseason, the draft, and so on. And eventually in August, the season starts, and we'll provide some insights about what comes next for Tudo sobre Futebol Americano. Thank you, everyone. Um grande abraço e obrigado.